Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Roads to Liberty podcast. This is a subscribers only live stream. So, to all our fantastic fans who are going to be listening to this a week after it comes out, if you want to be a part of these subscriber live stream, make sure to go to our Facebook page and become a supporting listener. Because I got to tell you, it really helps out. The show is not free to put on, and a little extra to help us out goes a long way. So thank you to all our subscribers for doing that. I want to welcome tonight our guest. He's a longtime friend of the show. I've had him on a few times before. Mr. T.J. Roberts. What's going on, my man?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Are you hearing me okay?
I can hear you, yes. I can hear you now, at least.
Okay, perfect. Well, first, I want to say congratulations. You just got engaged. That's incredibly exciting. So good on you for that. It's always exciting and stuff to see a fellow Liberty lover getting hitched. That's fun stuff. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
All right. So first of all, I wanted to get an update on what we talked about last time we had you on the show. You were suing the state of Kentucky for violating your First Amendment rights to gather in it. Pretty much, they were arresting people at your church for gathering in violation of COVID lockdown orders. So, can you tell our audience a little bit about that and any updates you may have since then?
So we were all given us notices to quarantine for worshiping our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and thank God the Sixth Circuit Court, which is a federal appellate court, disagreed with the constitutionality of that and deemed that it was completely unconstitutional and stated that the governor acted beyond the bounds of the law and beyond the bounds of the Constitution. So far, he has not appealed it to the Supreme Court. So I'm guessing he's accepted that decision and has decided that he can't infringe upon the right to worship after all. Same thing with the right to travel, that was upheld. Same thing with the right to protest. Ultimately, if we take it up to the Sixth Circuit Court, they have overwhelmingly sided with liberty and with the Constitution. So there's a little bit of hope there. Now, there's a statewide lawsuit that I'm not a part of right now, but that's going to be going to the Kentucky Supreme Court this Thursday. I don't know what the results are going to be, but ultimately they don't have the final say. The judges in the Supreme Court of Kentucky, they're elected, and the people are watching for this decision. So
awesome. Well, looking forward to seeing what the outcome of all that is. So let's get into what we wanted you to talk about on the show today. So you started sharing a bunch of stories on your Facebook page about systematic abuse at Transylvania University in Kentucky against conservative, libertarian, essentially non-woke students at the university. And you posted something from a Samuel Crankshaw that he posted about Nick Sandmann. Now he's a member of the ACLU, and as I understand, he's a professor at the university, and he went off at the news that Nick Sandmann was going to be accepted as a student at Transylvania University. I want to share a little bit of what he said. He says, "Does anyone else think it's a bit of a stain on Transylvania University for accepting Nick Sandmann? I'm sure it's a both sides, quote unquote, defense, but it's pretty counter to the mission and another instance of there not actually being equal sides to an issue. I think TU should accept anyone willing to have an open mind and engage in debate, regardless of their views. That's how we all learn. That's Transc's mission. But this kid clearly is a provocateur in training with no intention of learning. He exists only to troll, intimidate, and play victim. He and his attorney proudly use their national platform to promote QAnon and has literally been the direct cause of multiple instances of violence. He proudly defending Kyle Rittenhouse, how dare he, who murdered two people for exercising political speech. Ironically, This silenced victim is running with Don Jr., spoke at the GOP convention and has a bill in his honor at the General Assembly, has attended private schools, and has a national law firm representing him, etc. So silenced. So this seems a little bit detached from reality for a university professor. What was your take when you saw this?
Okay, so first off, Crankshaw is not a professor at Transy, but I'll get into something that a professor did say that honestly
Okay.
made what Crankshaw had to say look like child's play. Sam Crankshaw is an attorney and a staff member at the ACLU of Kentucky, and my whole take on it is that it's the ACLU showing their true colors as usual, where they will defend speech with which they disagree, and then will censor views with which they will defend speech with which they agree, and then they will stifle views with which they disagree. The ACLU of Kentucky fought against the Campus Free Speech Act. They've actively fought against due process for students. They're actively suing the federal government for making the standard beyond reasonable doubt for criminal behavior, which is ingrained in the Bill of Rights. But what really disturbed me was it's typical to see a bunch of Transylvania University alum and students condemning and harassing conservative and libertarian students. I dealt with that for 3.5 years. What I didn't expect to see was a professor coming out and publicly announcing his intent to spy on and document his behavior on campus with the goal of throwing him out the moment he steps outside that 3x5 index card of allowable opinion on Transy's campus, making the statement of, if Nick Sandmann takes any of his classes, and he's a gender studies professor, so I don't know why he would ever take any of those classes.
I don't know
But
why anyone at all would ever take those classes.
yeah, but the fact of the matter is, like they said, that if he takes one of my classes, he'll have to accept what is said in the class and will have to learn the material. I'm all for learning the material, but what I'm also against is making the statement that the class material is inherently doctrine. If you can give a sound argument against something that is taught in a class, I think they should hear you out. They should hear what you have to say, and they should take that into consideration. But that's not what they're looking for. They're not looking for honest conversation. They're not looking for the pursuit of truth. They're training people to be the jackboots of the modern Marxist movement. That's all that it is over there. I spent 3.5 years looking at that, just finding little nuggets of value within it. There are a few professors, of course, that are good there, but overwhelmingly, that's what you get whenever you go to universities like Transylvania University. And that was one of the things that sort of provoked the tirade I went on them over a few days ago.
So it's especially true considering that gender studies at best is a social science and therefore open to debate. It's not chemistry, it's not geology, it's a social science, not set in stone.
Well,
To say to someone that, oh, you just have to accept whatever is said here is like, no, you don't. It's more like philosophy where debate should be encouraged between students, not rammed down your throat. You will be this or else. But more to the point, for those of you who don't remember, Nick Sandmann was that Kentucky student who was at a field trip in Washington, D.C., when a bunch of Black Hebrew Israelites started yelling racial slurs in their direction and in the direction of some Native Americans who were in the area. One of those Native Americans got up in the face of Nick Sandmann for whatever reason, probably for publicity's sake. And then the media ran with it, saying that this Nick Sandmann kid has gotten in this dude's face, was harassing him, was being a white supremacist racist. Turns out absolutely none of that was true. It was a bold-faced lie from the very beginning. We have 2 hours worth of footage showing the entire incident, proving that this poor kid didn't do a damn thing wrong. And yet still, we have professional individuals working at the ACLU and as a professor at a university still clinging on to this false narrative that this kid did something wrong that he needs to be punished for. My God, they cannot let go of this narrative, and it's sad and pathetic that they're still holding on to it.
Well, and that's the entire thing, isn't it? To where these people who are saying that they have to accept everything that is said in that classroom, they're entirely focused on just promoting their narrative. And that's the thing, is like, and as you said about social sciences, it's a fluid study. As a matter of fact, gender studies itself relied on dissenting from the agreed upon view of social sciences, of sociology. That's where all of that came from. But of course, now that they have control of the narrative, they're focusing on just keeping that tight grip on it. And that's what drives them crazy about Nick Sandmann. It's not that he's pro life, it's not that he supports President Trump. It's the fact that he stood up to the mainstream narrative and he won millions out of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
he
the fact
made
that
CNN.
this kid is CNN's highest paid employee, so of course they don't
He,
like him.
this kid made CNN his bitch, and they've hated him ever since for that. So you were there for 3.5 years at this university where professors are threatening to stalk a student. So why don't you share a little bit about how it was being a libertarian student at a university that seems to be openly hostile to anyone that doesn't swallow the woke narrative?
Absolutely. So one of the first things that I have to point out is that there are good people at that university. There's good people at just about every university where you can find some refuge. But from the beginning of my time at Transy, there was a divide. From the moment that I announced that I was the campus coordinator for Rand Paul's student campaign, from the moment that I started a Young Americans for Liberty chapter, the administration was looking for a way to shut it down. Whenever I had Rand Paul stickers put up on my dorm, people would literally carve it out of the door with a knife. Whenever I tried to host Adam Kokesh, a libertarian activist, on campus, the university threatened to shut down my YAL chapter. At one semester before that, they hosted Hillary Rodham Clinton on campus for a campaign stop. All I was doing was just making sure that Adam Kokesh had the chance to speak his mind to the members of my chapter and people interested in his message. That's all it was. But that in itself scared them to the point that they were willing to threaten an 18-year-old freshman in college. I tried to play nice because I was a naive freshman, thinking that these people were good people with genuine opinions and a genuine earning to show the world the truth. And dear Lord, do I regret that, because the fact of the matter is, if I just went ahead and hosted him on campus, there wasn't a thing that legally they could have done to me, but I decided to host it off campus anyway. The day after the election, I guess someone was really upset about the fact that that Rand Paul had won re-election, because someone walked up to me as I was wearing a Rand Paul shirt and spit on me. The only punishment this kid got was he was required to write a 124-word letter of apology. It was the most canned apology I've ever read. It wasn't a real apology. This guy doesn't regret it. The only thing that they were trying to do was get me to sign a piece of paper, which I stupidly did, that made it to where I could not sue him in a civil tort, or I couldn't press charges against him if I went through their disciplinary route. So,
do you think that if a Trump supporter had spit on a Democratic student, that they would have received the same treatment?
oh God, no. I mean, as a Trump supporter did something even somewhat more mild than spitting on someone. The very next year, this one student put out this post encouraging folk to call ICE on an undocumented student at Transy. They ran his ass off campus. I'm not here to comment on the morality of what he said and what he did, but I can say this much, is that if a left winger had screenshotted my profile, called me every name in the book, and told people to go to my house and call the university, tell them to fire me, and just all that stuff, they would have had a similar response to the spitting incident. That person would have still gotten his or her degree from Transy. There would have been no public outcry of it, but because a Trump supporter went after a left-wing student, there was hell to pay for that student.
You know, the funny thing about the Kokesh story that you tell is that Adam Kokesh was running for president at that time. So he
Yes.
was a legitimate presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. And they told you that you couldn't host him on campus, but Hillary Clinton could be hosted. So there's a very clear political bias there that I don't know. It's like, it's surprising to me that they would even know who Adam Kokesh was. Like they did a 5-minute Google search on him, probably found out that he got arrested in DC for open carrying, and they're like, oh, we can't have this guy on campus. He's a radical. But of course, you can have Hillary Clinton on, who wants to start endless wars in the Middle East and bomb countless brown people. That's perfectly okay. But Adam Kokesh, he's the extremist.
Again, they're scared of someone carrying a weapon to defend themselves, but they're totally fine with murdering millions of brown people in the Middle East. I wonder if that would be acceptable in their racial studies major pattern.
Someone needs to bring that up in the gender studies and make Mr. Professor Triggered account for that. So you were there for, you said, 3.5 years.
Yes.
Did things ever change? Did things ever change in the course of those years, or was it pretty much as hostile the day you left as it was the day you got there?
It changed, but it got worse. My sophomore year, you had that incident with the Trump supporter getting run off campus, but you also had the fact that another student who wore a "Make America Great Again" hat was thrown to the ground. This girl was like 5'3", maybe 100 pounds, and nothing came of that. Didn't make any public media whatsoever. Just all in all, weird statements where the left has such a broad scope of what they can say and do, but whenever a conservative student or a libertarian student decides to just slightly deviate from that, you'd think it's the end of the world. I mean, my sophomore year was relatively quiet after that whole situation. My junior year is where it got interesting. My junior year, more students came on campus. They started up a Young Americans for Freedom chapter, and they decided to hand out constitutions on Constitution Day. And as a result, some Marxist punks decided to set the Constitution on fire, write Nazi punks fuck off on it, and slid it into the dorm rooms of the students who did this. These students only had to do like 5 hours of community service as a consequence, and one of those students now sits on Transy's student government.
Wow, for handing out constitutions. This is the funny thing that people like to do, where they'll say, oh, we're just opposed to fascists. But something as simple as handing out a constitution on a campus is enough to get you labeled a fascist. Kind of this rhetorical bait and switch, where they say they're against fascism, but really what they are is against you. They're against you, the libertarian, you, the conservative, you, the anti-woke student. And if the only reason they call you as fascist is so they can get away with violence against you. So this wasn't the only incident, however. You also talked about an incident where a group set up a table and was canvassing with students, and then nothing happened. And the very next day, your group tried to do the same thing and got shut down. So what happened there?
Okay, so yeah, it's the same Marxist punks, by the way, that did that whole thing with the Constitution Day. There's a little bit more that I'm going to say after this one, but on May 1st, which is the communist holiday May Day, they decided, the Democratic Socialists of America decided to go out and table. They did it outside of the so-called free speech zone. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't fill out any paperwork. They just grabbed a table and they petitioned for people to join their group. That is their right. That's the First Amendment. I was happy that Transy allowed that to happen. Then I decided, you know what? Let's have some fun. Got with the members of my groups, and we decided to host a table for free speech in the exact same location, at the exact same time, in the exact same manner. So whenever you look at First Amendment restrictions, the Constitution allows for narrowly tailored time, place, and manner restrictions that serve a government interest, and that is as as loosely applicable as humanly possible in order to preserve freedom of speech. And it must be content neutral as well. So we figured if it's okay for the Democratic Socialists to do it, it's definitely okay for us to do it because we're doing it in the same time, place, and manner. Before we even started, as we were setting up, a member of the administration came over and said that we cannot be doing this. Later on, the dean of students came over and said the same thing and threatened us with even stricter restrictions and punishments for violating those. They threw off one of my friends from campus for holding up a sign that says, "Do you like free speech?"
They threw him off campus.
They
Like,
told
kicked him
him
out
to
of the
leave.
university? Oh, they told him to leave
Yeah.
for holding up a sign that says, "Do you like free speech?" Apparently, the answer was no.
The very clear no was their answer. And
All
the
right,
thing
so
is,
they go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you to continue.
Okay, yeah. So the thing is, the restrictions that they used were the results of another event that same group used. So after the constitutions, Transylvania YAL and Transylvania Young Americans for Freedom, we all teamed up together and did a graveyard for civil liberties, where we just had these these gravestones cut out. It was October. It was getting close to Halloween. And it just showed like all of the civil liberties that we've lost: honest money, the right to privacy, things along those lines. And also what days are the dates. So it was an educational thing. Oh, the campus lost their mind over it. Like, people were crying and screaming over it. And as a result, the president of the university, who thankfully is no longer the president of that university, wrote and drafted European-style censorship rules in this thing. Put out an article calling for national European censorship laws, things along those lines. So this is a systematic issue. It's not just a couple punk-ass students and a professor. It is the administration to the highest level at this university, to where conservatives cannot speak their mind without retaliation.
Wait. A European censor law. What does that even mean?
So content-based, bans on hate speech, bans on demonstrations that go against the government. Think about that woman in Australia who was arrested for hosting an anti-lockdown protest. Stuff like that, where student groups are
Gestapo
censored.
shit.
Yes, direct content-based censorship. And the thing that's amazing,
they want it.
the thing that's
Wow.
amazing, those students that did that civil liberties graveyard, they went through the process that the university outlined for doing student events. They went through the paperwork. They did everything to the letter, and they still faced retaliation.
That's amazing. So even when they play the university's game, they obey the rules, they do everything they have to do. And they wouldn't even, that doesn't even sound like something that's even remotely offensive. You know, you're doing a graveyard for rights that you're missing out on, liberties that have died and gone to the wayside. That's something that everyone should be on board with. That's something that the left should be on board with. But now you have students who are freaking out about something so benign as that, getting this liberty organization in trouble for that. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is that the left is not liberal. They're authoritarian to the core. They don't care about your liberties. They want to eradicate your very way of existence.
Yeah, and it's funny, if you would have just called this like a Black Lives Matter protest, they probably wouldn't have had any issue with it at all. In fact, you'd probably have the entire the entire staff out there helping you do that. But you do a graveyard for the civil liberties that we are missing out on. All of a sudden, this protest against government interference in our day-to-day lives, that's not allowed. That's what gets these university students pissed off.
Yep. And that's the thing, Nathan, is like you look at it, we're going against the violations of civil liberties that embolden big government, that force a police state on us, that ultimately get black and brown bodies killed. That's the point, is that they only want to treat the symptoms. Do Black Lives Matter? Absolutely they do. But what you have to consider is, why is it that black people are getting beaten and killed on live video on social media? It's because we have a massive government that necessitates a police state. Every growth of government that these university elites call for ultimately leads to more black people getting killed. Ultimately, I blame those guys for this police state in which we live.
Yeah, as you probably should. I mean, if you're a student in college, you're expected to be at a higher standard of intellect than people who do not go to university, right? Like, you guys are in college. You're supposed to be smarter than me. I didn't go to college. I drive a truck for a living. And yet, you don't see me crying over seeing people demonstrate about they're being upset that their civil liberties are being violated. Like, you're supposed to be smarter than me, but you're not. You're just full of propaganda that I got to miss out on. So I guess I have that in my favor, at least. All right, TJ, we're up against a half hour. Is there anything else you want to share before we call it a night?
I mean, the big thing is just understand that Transylvania University is just one university that is like this. I'd be willing to bet that just about every university has horror stories along these lines. The fact of the matter is, it's not unique just to Transy. It's not unique to the professors I called out. It's a systematic issue to where the state is fundamentally discriminating against conservative and libertarian students. So just be careful about it before you send your kid off to a college.
Absolutely. This is absolutely not a problem of just one university. This is systemic. It's nationwide. It's at universities all over the country. You have to be very careful. And I feel bad for this Nick Sandmann kid. His only crime was wearing a MAGA hat in DC. And now he has people, grown adults, grown-ass adults, threatening to stalk him on university, acting the fool, being upset that he's being accepted at a college, and all he did was wear a MAGA hat in DC. I'm telling you, if you want to ensure that people like Nick Sandmann are energized to vote for their candidate and make sure that your candidate loses, this is the way to do it. TJ, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your stories. Congratulations again on your engagement. So excited for you. For everybody else, stick around for a little bit. I want to talk to you a little bit about our new store and the websites you can get our products. But TJ, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Now remember, we have a store up for you guys to buy our shirts and other products. Now remember, we do not ask for any money in making this show. It's absolutely free to everyone. Now, if you're a subscriber, you're going to get this episode on the podcast stream a week early. But everyone else, you're still able to listen to the podcast for free. And we've been doing this without making a dime off of it since 2016. But we do have some shirts and a couple coffee mugs for you guys to take a look at. So right here we have our Build or Die Boogaloo Boy Igloo shirt. We got Joe Jorgensen shirts. We got all kinds. This one's a personal favorite of mine, the Boo Girl t-shirt. Absolutely fantastic. And you can find all these products at roads2liberty.com. That's roads2liberty.com. And right here we have our Roads to Liberty coffee mug. I've got that one on order. Can't wait for it to come in. For all you coffee drinkers out there, make sure to pick that up. It's absolutely fantastic. And if you're a Roads to Liberty subscriber, remember that you can call into this show every Tuesday night for the Token and Hobbs show. Hobbs is probably going to do it as well for Hobbservation, so that's exciting. And when we do these interviews, you'll be able to call into the show then as well. Now, remember to subscribe to the Think Liberty Network. Go to think-liberty.com to find all our podcasts, as well as the podcasts of the other shows on the network. Looking forward to seeing you guys there. Good night, everyone.